Welcome to Radical Personal Finance, a show dedicated to providing you with the knowledge, skills, insight, and encouragement you need to live a rich and meaningful life now while building a plan for financial freedom in 10 years or less. My name is Joshua Sheets. I'm your host. Today is Friday, March 21, 2025. And on this Friday, as we do on any Friday in which I can arrange to record a live call, we have live Q&A. You call in, talk about anything that you want. If you would like to gain access to one of these shows, you can do it by becoming a patron of the show. Go to patreon.com/radicalpersonalfinance. Sign up to support the show on Patreon, and that will gain access for you to one of these shows. We begin with Aaron in Tennessee. Aaron, welcome to the show. How can I serve you today?
Hey, Joshua. I got two questions. One a general one, and the other one is like a personal situation. The first one is like how to deal with the inflation. Like all my once I consider myself like financially educated, I've been preparing for a recession or a downtime where I've saved like in a hard cash, like 3 to 6 months of expenses and all. That's all in my savings account. But the last couple of years, the inflation has really been eating me up. Like which I consider as like 3 to 6 months of expenses. It's more like 1 to 2 months of expenses now. My expenses are going up. And how to deal it in a day-to-day or month-to-month budgeting wise. I work a salaried position, like it's 9 to 5 job. Like the wages are not going up that fast. Like it's 1%, 1.2% increment. This is what I'm getting a job. So that's my first question: how to deal with the inflation on a month-to-month budgeting wise.
Okay.
And, you want to answer that, or
go ahead with your second? Go ahead with your second question, please. Also.
Okay. So the second question is like more personal. Like I'm in my like middle. So like late 30s, 2 kids. It's handful. Like the like busy job. More than 40 hours a week I work, and then like 2 young kids, like 3 and 5. It's like so much going on. Like hardly get like 5 to 6 hours of sleep. Like where is this all heading? Like sometimes I wonder like what's the meaning of it, or like when will I get a break? Like my 20s were not like this. My married life was not like this. Like it came like all of a sudden like life became like too busy, too fast, and I don't know how much like I see in the news, right? Like 45 people get heart attack and they die, and the big reason is they don't get rest, they don't take care of their body. I feel like I'm in that boat. Like I don't know how to travel through this. Like friends I talk to, like they say like this is a phase, like you will get through it, and I don't know how long it's going to happen.
Okay. All right, we'll go there in just a second. So these are two good questions. First, with regard to inflation, what is the rate of inflation that you are concerned about?
Okay, so I do my annual budget. Like I maintain good things, right? So a few years back, like when I did it, it was like 100K a year is my expenses. I did it like last year, it was 130K. I know the CPA, it may say like it's 2.6%, 3%, like whatever it is, but my annual expenses are increasing. It's not just because like say like we go to a restaurant. Earlier it used to be like bill comes around like $60, and right, like now we go it easily touches 100, 110. So it's things like that. Like to sorry, did I answer your question? Like it's the same activity that I'm doing, but it's all expensive.
Tell me those numbers again. Last year you spent how much, and this year you're spending how much?
I don't have the last year number as such, but means like 2024 number is like 130K, my annual expense. I did that like 3 years back, and it was 100K.
Okay. So if it was 3 years ago that you were spending $100,000 and now you're spending $130,000, that's not that is inflation, but I would say there's a good chance that has something to do with the financial conditions around, but that also would seem to be probably due to the lifestyle inflation, due to the fact that you have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. You would have found an easier time spending money 3 years ago versus today. So lifestyle inflation is a different question than financial inflation. And you're going to have to answer it differently. So let me give you two answers to your question. First, let's deal with financial inflation first and foremost. The reason I asked what the inflation rate that you're worried about is, or that you're thinking about, or that you're concerned about is, to try to get a sense of what kind of actions to take that would be appropriate to prepare for change. So, for example, we know that that the Federal Reserve targets something like a 3% inflation rate, right? 2 to 3%. That's what they're trying to get. They're trying to continually have an inflation rate of about 2 to 3%. Basically, we're all locked into that system. We understand that's the goal, and so we understand that we have to beat that. And so that's why we are forced to invest our money into investment assets that are going to give us a higher rate of return than that modest rate of inflation, that 2 or 3%. Now, if we get to 5 or 6 or 7% rates of inflation, then we start to notice that because it's slightly more than what is happening. And 5 or 6% year over year is going to have a certain effect. But still, all of this is within the range of just normal rates of inflation. So anything that is single-digit rate of inflation, I consider just to be a normal rate of inflation. And then the tools that you would use to prepare for that are relatively normal. So right now, as of the numbers that I just pulled up, the current yield on the T-bill is 4.28% for a 3-month T-bill, 4% for a 1-year T-bill, and so we have short-term T-bills running 4 to 4.3%. So if you opened your savings account with Treasury Direct, you could have that. Right now, with the Consumer Price Index for the 12 months ending February 2025 is 2.8%. So you can keep your cash in a T-bill account returning 4.28%, and you can enjoy an inflation rate of 2.8%. So you're 1 point something percent ahead of inflation just with ordinary financial tools. That would be the first thing. Now, we could also move into some people are worried about things like mass inflation or things like hyperinflation. So I think of mass inflation as double-digit inflation, 10%, 15%, 20%, something like that. I'm not aware, I don't think the term mass inflation has a technical definition, although, or if it does, I don't recall it at the moment. So just in my mind, I think, okay, 15% inflation. And I think that 15% inflation, mass inflation, is a relatively it's pretty easy to imagine. That happens pretty significantly in many economies. It hasn't happened so much in the United States. It hasn't happened so much with the US dollar, but it's pretty easy to imagine. So in a world of mass inflation, then I think we can still handle that mostly with kind of basic financial planning tools. And so, I would assume that in a world of mass inflation, I think that stocks would probably generally do well because the inflation is kind of cycling through the system. I think that you can raise rents on real estate you own. So I think all the traditional assets still work in that scenario. Then we would move from mass inflation to hyperinflation. And so somewhere at the top end of mass inflation, we start to run into significant problems. And that's where I think of strategies such as stockpiling. If you go back and you read books from the 1970s when they were experiencing widespread mass inflation and expected that to continue, what you will see is that stockpiling as a strategy is a very, very good strategy for mass inflation and also for hyperinflation. So stockpiling basically means any kind of durable goods that you can purchase today that will still be useful in the future, you should go ahead and stock up. So if you wear one kind of trousers and that's what you go for, then go ahead and purchase 10 pairs, or purchase 10 pairs of shoes, or stockpile cans of soup in your pantry, things like that. So I think that stockpiling is a really, really successful trend to prepare for successful tool to prepare for mass inflation and some level of hyperinflation. Because when you start to move over into a hyperinflation economy, it's impossible to all the financial solutions start to fall apart. And so let's talk though. What do you do in a hyperinflation scenario? The way that I think of that, the primary goal that you have in a hyperinflation scenario is to move your money out of the currency that is hyperinflating into a different currency. So I am persuaded that hyperinflation is not a contagious condition. So if you look at an economy where you have hyperinflation, the one I've studied most over the last 10 years would be Venezuela, right? You had the Venezuelan Bolivar currency go through massive hyperinflation. I think in 1 year they had 1,000,000% hyperinflation. Literally, I have stacks of bolivares, stacks of the currency, and people go around with backpacks full of money. But that hyperinflation did not extend to the Brazilian real or the Colombian peso and other currencies in the area, nor did it extend to the US dollar. So your basic goal of how to prepare for that kind of high-level inflation is to move your money into a competitive currency and get it out of the currency that's hyperinflating. And then also you want to get yourself out of the hyperinflationary economy. And so that's why I built the International Escape Plan course, internationalescapeplan.com. If the place that you're living is going into hyperinflation, life will be very unlivable there very soon. So the basic strategy is you want to have stockpiles of enough stuff to get you through a few months until you can get out and get your money out. Hopefully you have a plan and you already have some money positioned abroad and you have easy conduits to get your money out of the hyperinflating currency into a competitor currency, and you get yourself and your family out and you go and you live in another place until the hyperinflation blows over. And the hyperinflation would tend to be 2 to 3 years. Can't seem to continue for much longer than that. There's a reset, they rebase the currency, and usually that brings in some kind of stability. So that's the spectrum that I normally look at to say, how do we deal with financial inflation? And I think that covers most things. You can get good returns on cash, so you want to make sure that your savings accounts are invested in the best rates that you can get. Consider just using a T-bills account or just to protect your personal cash. You also then want to make sure that you have just good traditional financial planning. For most people, that'll mean stocks and bonds and real estate. You try to keep your debts fixed. You may have some alternative assets that may perform better. So you might have gold, which may keep pace with inflation. And then you would have a plan for the more extreme cases, and that plan would ordinarily involve stockpiling and moving to a competing currency. So that would be the financial inflation. But all of that said, I don't think that's your problem from what you said. Yes, okay, I understand that maybe your emergency fund has reduced a little bit, and that might be a little bit of financial inflation, but I think most of what you're experiencing is just lifestyle inflation. And I think that that's very congruent with the second part that you described. Because if your lifestyle is not under control and you're feeling quite stressed, most people will respond to stress by spending money. And so you find yourself in a situation where you feel like you're working all the time. You're not sleeping well. When you're not sleeping well, you're not making good decisions. When you're not sleeping well, you're emotionally on edge. That makes you angry, makes you frustrated. It causes your home life to be unpleasant. And so you probably are spending a lot more on restaurants than you did in the past, because now you need to order three meals to cover 2 small children, or maybe even 4 meals sometimes instead of 2 or 2.5. And you're probably going out to eat more, and you're making up for the lifestyle stress that you're experiencing by spending more money. And so there are some other strategies, I think, that are important to deal with that. The basic truth is that you have to change, unless money is unlimited and you have a very high producing budget. As you start to be responsible for more people and as your family grows, you have to change fairly consistently and somewhat dramatically how you approach your expenses. And you have to change the categories of expenses, and you have to get rid of the expenses or dramatically change the expenses that children affect directly. And the most obvious one, where children affect directly, has to do with the food that they consume, especially on things like eating out. So you should check your records, and I bet you if you look at it, you would find that maybe 30% of your problem of the difference between your records 4 years ago versus today is due to financial inflation. Certainly things cost more. Going out to eat costs more than it did 4 years ago. Of course it does. But I would bet 60% or 70% is due to lifestyle inflation, just to the fact that you have to feed 4 people now. And when you go out to a restaurant and you're feeding 4 people, that's a 4x increase in cost, which really adds up. So I can talk further about kind of some ways to deal with the lifestyle inflation thing, but basically you have to look at it straightforwardly, and you have to adjust so that your expenses stay within your means, even though you have children. And what it usually means is you're going to spend more money with children. I spend a little bit more than I did, obviously. My food budget is bigger, and there are activities and things that are more, but it's not 4x more. If your case, going from a married couple to having 2 children, usually it would be like 2.5 to 3x more, just because you change your lifestyle. There's some natural lifestyle changes. If you don't make those natural lifestyle changes, such as, hey, we eat at home a whole lot more than we do going out to restaurants, that's when your children really will sink your budget.
Okay, yeah, it's more like 2.5 to 3x is what I'm seeing from my data. And like any other suggestions, like eating out, cutting down on that? The most budget I see is like it goes to Costco, Target, Amazon. Like these are like high spend areas, and that covers quite a lot of things.
Yeah. Does your wife have a job?
Yes.
Okay, so you're dual income household. All right. And is your wife, does she sew clothes? Does she go to garage sales? Does she buy stuff on Facebook Marketplace, or does she automatically go to Costco and Target and such for buying things?
Okay, so we were doing Facebook Marketplaces for kids' toys and all. Again, like it got real busy. Like instead of going from one place to another, like Costco is like one place stop. Target is like drive up, pick up through drive through. So more convenience creep into our life, and I guess like that's where the money is going out.
So basically, what you will find is that if your wife has a job and children, and you have a job and you have children, then you are going to spend lots of money to buy things for your children because you don't have time to find another way to do that. So you are locked in to a high consumption lifestyle because of your jobs. So let me give some examples, right? When my wife and I first had children, I don't think we paid for clothes for, I don't know, probably the first, actually, let me be very precise. We didn't purchase any baby clothes until we didn't purchase any, still barely purchase any clothes for our children, with the exception of basically a few outfits per year. So the vast majority of our children's clothing has been acquired for free from hand-me-downs from people who are getting rid of clothing. And the only clothes that we purchase is that my wife likes to purchase a few outfits that really fit her style so that she has some nice outfits for Easter pictures or things like that. So to this day, she will purchase usually probably around two or three outfits per child. Sometimes it's one per child. Sometimes it's 2 to 3. But let's call it on average 2 or 3 outfits per child per year, which I would say runs us somewhere in the range of, I don't know, $600 or $800 a year. So we spend about $600 or $800 a year on clothing for 5 children. You say, how? Why? Well, originally, when it started with baby clothes are the easiest place to start because babies grow out of their clothes really quick. They're changing sizes every 3 months. And in the U.S. American society, where people don't have very many children, lots of people rush out. Lots of people like you and your wife who have two income jobs. You rush out, you buy lots of clothes, you go to Target all the time, you go to Amazon all the time, you purchase all these cute outfits, you buy them, you have two children. I'm not accusing you of this. I'm just saying this is an example. You can choose what applies. Have two children, a boy and a girl. The outfits are basically unused. The baby's worn them 3 or 4 times. Then you're looking for someone to pass them along. And so we just always say yes when people say, do you want clothes? We just always say yes. But then my wife takes the time. She goes through everything. She chooses the outfits that she likes. She chooses the ones that are clean, organizes them, gets rid of them, and then we just pass them along. And then all the other ones get. She stockpiles, organizes them based on size, whether they're boys' clothes, girls' clothes, things like that. And she's always been a couple of years, basically a few years ahead of the children's clothing needs because we have stockpiles of clothes. So it's not like it's anything that anybody can't do, but it's something that takes time. And it takes, I don't know how much, but it takes hours. Again, she doesn't do very much anymore because a lot of it is stockpiled, but it's the kind of thing that takes some hours to go through, and then she's got to get the stains out of the clothes that she likes that were stained and things like that. So it takes time, but that's time that she has because she doesn't have a job that pays her money. So but you can't do that, right? Your wife can't do that. You have busy, stressful jobs. You get home from work. We got to hang out with the children. And so when it hits, 7:30 and you get the children in bed, you're exhausted. And so you have to, rush to bed and fall into sleep. You don't want to face some random pile of clothes from hand-me-downs where you're only going to keep, 3 out of 15 outfits and the rest you're going to pass along to someone else. You don't want to face that. So it's easier to go to Amazon. It's easier to go to Costco. It's easier to go to Target and just buy whatever's on the rack. But the cost for that is enormous because you don't have the time. So that's a practical example of how this stuff works out, is that you either have time or you have money, and you don't have time, and so you spend money. Now, over the years, we spend more money than we used to because we have less time, because we have more children. So I'd have to go check my records, but I'm pretty confident that I'm pretty good with the money, that saying that we spend less than $1,000 a year for 5 children's clothes is certainly accurate. Where we expect to spend more now is shoes, and so we don't have as many hand-me-down shoes, so we get more shoes and things like that. But still, it's just not that much. I would guess that your household budget in those categories is probably at least with 2 children, is at least what mine is, and probably a good bit more because of the way that you do it. So let's go to things like food similarly. So also with food, we have the same basic example. The normal structural change that a family will make when you have children is you stop eating out with the exception of a specific special reason to eat out. So I eat out because my family, we have more money than some other people. We eat out more than a lot of other people that I know. But even so, that still winds up being, call it 2 or 3 times a month. With the children, probably once or twice a month. Usually if we have visitors or if we're entertaining, something like that, then we do that. But it's not a weekly occurrence. It's not a regular occurrence. My wife and I go out on dates, and so the 2 of us eat out, but that's because we're going out as an event. It's not because we have to. And even when we go out as an event, you still have to cook a whole meal full of food for the children so that they eat, and then you just go out and eat something so you have an event outside the house. And so that's a big change. But what's the cost of eating out? Well, the cost of cooking. The cost of cooking is that it takes time. It takes time. And so even the difference between convenience foods, let's say you go to Costco and you purchase convenience foods, those are a lot cheaper than restaurant food or, DoorDash or whatever, but they're still a lot more expensive than cooking from scratch. And so we don't really eat convenience foods. We're pretty simple. Neither of us are foodies or necessarily like great cooks, but everything is just made from probably 3 to 5 ingredients for a meal. And that's basically it. But that takes still an hour to get dinner ready, which is an hour that you don't have. If you get off work at 5:30 and your wife gets off work at 5:30 and you go pick up the children from daycare, by the time you get home at 6:15, at 6:30, the children are going nuts because they're hungry, they're tired, everything's difficult, and you don't have the patience to cook in that circumstance. So you just got to get some food in them because the children are hungry, and so that's where you wind up at a restaurant. So once again, it's money or it's time. So those are the areas where your inflation is probably happening, and that will tie in. Actually, I'll answer your second question in a moment, but let me just pause. Does that make sense? Is any of that relevant to you?
Oh, absolutely. You're hitting the nail on the head. It very much resonates. Yep.
Right. I guess the final thing I would say is like things like toys and doodads and things like that. So the other difference I would give as somebody who has older children and who has more children is basically over the years, I've just stopped buying toys. So in the beginning, with your first baby, you have your baby shower, and people just give you all kinds of toys. And then as a parent, you think, oh, I just love giving my children things because I show my love for my children with their toys. And you get a little bit older, and number one, you develop a disgust for toys that are not well made. And so anything that's plastic or anything that doesn't survive, multiple children, you just toss it out. And also, by the way, so there's two things I'm trying to say. Number one is the quantity, and number two is the efficiency. So let's deal with the quantity first. As you get older and as you have more children and your children get older, you realize I cannot have a warehouse in my home for toys. So right now we have one modestly sized toy closet, and my wife goes through it all the time. It's like, what can we get rid of? What can we get rid of? Because if you have more children, you just can't warehouse all their stuff. Whereas with two, you probably have a lot of stuff, and you're used to buying a lot of stuff for your children. It's normal. We all go through it. But then you have the durability of stuff. And so what happens is if you have a boy and a girl, you're like, oh, I'm going to buy this toy here. I'm going to buy that toy there. As you have more children, you recognize what a waste of time this is. I just want one toy that's going to last for 5 children and still go. So you choose different kinds of toys, and then once the toys are bought, you stop buying anymore. So the thing about having kind of larger family versus a smaller family is that when you have a smaller family, you're always operating in the least efficient financial position. So every child has to have fresh clothes. Whereas when you have 4 children, or I have 4 boys, right? I can if an outfit usually doesn't make it through 4 boys, but the point is you can pass it down. It'll go down 4 times, and so you buy the outfit one time for 4 children. Whereas if you have a boy and a girl, you buy the outfit afresh for each one. Same thing with toys. We've bought enough toys. We don't need any more toys for the rest of life, and so it really doesn't matter. But yet, as your children get older, now you got an 8-year-old. What kind of 8-year-old toys do you need? I've got all the toys needed from 0 to 10. There's no reason for any more. And then you start to, I guess the other change is you start to be a little bit more calloused and a little bit more experienced, and you say, why should I give you a toy when the toy is going to keep your interest for 10 minutes? When if you go outside, there's a big, beautiful stick right outside the door, and that'll keep your interest for 20 minutes. And if you climb up the tree and you throw the stick down, then now we've got an hour of entertainment. Or if you take the stick and you fight your brother with it, then now we've got 2 hours of entertainment. So there's really no point in buying any toys. And so I basically look with disgust at the idea of buying physical things, which because of having been there, done that, and realized that was a waste. So none of this is intended to make me sound like better than you or anything like that. Just simply to say, like, these are some of the lessons that I've learned over the decade plus of being a parent.
Okay, got it. Like, I'll go to inputs. Like, thank you. I'll try to implement them.
Right.
And one question regarding like the time versus money, right? Like, yes, like if one of us pausing on our job, like, is that an option? Like, we struggle with that. Like, we often discuss on that, and then like we go back and forth. Like, we did all the education so long, and it's like some of the like peak earning years, right? So I don't want to like miss out this year's. Like, can you talk a little bit on that?
How much do you earn, and how much does your wife earn at your jobs?
I make around like 125. My wife makes around 110.
Okay.
But our bonuses are high, so both are equally same. Like, my bonuses are like 3 to 5 grand a year. Hers is around like 10 to 12 grand a year. So.
Yeah. You are in the hardest possible situation to be in to make this decision. Mm-hmm. So do not expect anything that I'm going to say to be easy. I'm genuinely filled with compassion and empathy, and I affirm that this is a very, very difficult situation to be in. What are easier situations to be in? Well, in my case, when my wife and I married, I made a lot of money and she made a very small amount of money. So when she stopped working for income, then it was a pretty obvious decision. So if I'm talking to somebody, and let's say there's a husband and he earns $150,000 a year and his wife earns $40,000 or $50,000 a year, it's a pretty easy decision to say, you know what, this extra $40,000 or $50,000 a year, when we compare that to what we could have with if you had time free for the family, is a pretty easy, obvious decision to make. I've worked with other people, right? I've had clients. I've had 3 clients that I know of where their wives made huge amounts of money. In one case, the wife was an executive at a big company. She made about $1 million a year. And the husband, he made like $100,000 a year. And so he quit his job and he was the full-time parent and she was the lady in the office. And so I think it can work that way. It's not as normal and as natural, and it comes with a set of problems, but I think it can work that way. So you have a big disparity of incomes. It makes it fairly obvious that that one person should stay home with the children when you cover the cost of daycare, cost of working, all of that. Now, when you have high incomes, let's say that you earned, $500,000 a year and your wife earned $500,000 a year. Well, then you could be pretty comfortable on $500,000 a year if she quit her job for 5 years to be home with the children for the 5 years before kind of they're at natural school age. That would probably set her back a little bit, right? She would lose a little ground in the marketplace. Her wages would be a little lower, but most mothers would be pretty happy with that trade as long as their husband earns enough money. Now, in your situation, to go from a household income of $250,000 to a household income of $125,000 would be a very, very difficult decision because that's a meaningful cut in lifestyle. That's a significant less amount of money that you're able to save. That's a significantly lower lifestyle that you are able to live. And so that's a meaningful thing you have to pay attention to. The problem is that both you and your wife, if both of you are employees, you're living the least possibly efficient lifestyle imaginable. So you have all of the costs of 2 jobs. You have to have 2 cars. You have 2 jobs. You have 2 sets of taxes, 2 sets of employment taxes. You have you have income taxes based upon a high income. You both have bosses you have to negotiate. You have the least efficient approach, but you don't have enough money to actually feel like you're getting rich, right? You feel like you're just getting by. You're stressed. You don't feel like you're making progress.
Yeah, I mean, like it struck me hard. Like I recently got my appraisal. Like it was 1.2% increment. It's like I'm getting more expertise on the work that I'm doing for the amount of like the value of the money per se. Like it is less. Like it just threw me off.
Yeah. And again, I'm not criticizing you in any of this. Just to be clear, I'm just trying to speak honestly to what you're experiencing, so we can all learn.
Please go ahead.
So basically, this is why your life sucks, is because you have all of the stress that comes with working, and now you've added all the stress that comes with children on top of that, and you have a very expensive lifestyle, and it's very hard to get ahead. And it's going to continue to be hard to get ahead unless you can find some significant change. So what are the changes that can happen? So the first change that would be very ordinarily kind of normal in your lifestyle is that in about 5 years, you'll be in a different situation. So if you don't have any more children and you have in 5 years a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, well, now your children will be less demanding on you with regard to their time and their attention, and they'll be more able to fit into society where they're in school and they go to school and they go to aftercare stuff, and you can kind of make it work. And so one thing that can pass is just time. The second option that you can choose is you can choose to make some dramatic lifestyle change. So if you or your wife have a different ambition than what is reflected in your job, and you say, I'm going to go and start a business, or I really want to be a stay-at-home mom, or something like that, you can make a different change. You're not locked in where you are now. And you can make a variety of those changes. So they're all open to you, but you have to decide, this is what I want to do. So if you wanted to quit your job and go and get a better job, making more money, you could do that. If you wanted to quit your job and go start a business, hopefully making more money, you could do that. There's lots of people who do that. If you wanted to quit your job and move to a lower cost of living town, you could do that. You could change and go to a lower cost of living place, and maybe you can work remotely, and now all of a sudden you can be fine on one income, and that frees up the other person to start a business. And so whenever I have a husband and wife who have any kind of differences between them, I think you're best served to exploit those differences. So sometimes exploiting the differences is to have a full-time homemaker and a full-time income earner. Sometimes it's to have a full-time businessman and a full-time investor. The one I've seen work so well so many times is that the husband runs a business and the wife runs a real estate portfolio. That can work really well. Or some other thing, right? The wife becomes a homesteader, or the husband becomes a farmer, and we've just got the wife has a job, but he farms and homesteads. Like there's a variety of things that happen. I can't tell you what is, what's right for you. All I can tell you is that one of the reasons you're experiencing this stress is due to the lifestyle that you have chosen. And I think what you would need to do in order to make any kind of change is count the cost of the lifestyle that you've chosen. So speaking purely for myself, I have simply always refused and still continue to refuse. I am not willing to live the lifestyle that you're living. It's not attractive to me. I won't do it. I'm not interested. And so, I'm not willing to trade my family for a little bit more money. And so my wife and I, when we married, we knew no matter what, doesn't matter, we're going to make certain that we have a family. And so when my wife got pregnant, she quit her job. Now, that was easier for me because she was earning less money. It would have been harder if my wife, made $1 billion. That would have been a much bigger decision. But yet that was a choice. We have chosen to live a less expensive lifestyle in order to maintain freedom and flexibility. So I'm not going to go and live that lifestyle. And so we've chosen what we're not poor, but most people I know have fancier cars than I do. Most people I know have fancier houses than I do. I prefer to spend my money traveling, and I prefer to hang out with my children. That's the choices that I made. So at some point along the way, you're going to get basically just angry and make a decision and say, like, I'm not willing to live like this. And if you come to that position and you decide I'm not willing to live like this, then there'll be something that's next that you'll be able to reorient your life and go in that direction. I basically came to the conviction a couple decades ago that the lifestyle that people were trying to sell as somehow being attractive was a giant scam. And I came to that conviction pretty early that I just didn't want anything to do with it. I'm not interested in a dual income lifestyle. I'm not interested in 1 or 2 children and be done. I'm not interested in that lifestyle. I think it's pretty much a scam. I desire a different lifestyle. And so I've made a whole different set of decisions and trade-offs based upon being persuaded of that. But it's not so much as something I can say with dollars and cents. It's basically a sense of conviction, and it's a sense of vision. So it's not easy. I acknowledge it's not easy. But if you at some point, if you and your wife kind of get a glimmer of a different lifestyle that's attractive to you, then it would help you to decide, hey, you know what? Here's a different pathway that for us seems really appropriate. And then you'll have the confidence to go down that pathway. I would just simply say you cannot let money be the guiding factor on any of these things. Money is a woefully inadequate factor for you to build from, because at the end of your life, all the money is gone. So you got to start from there and then choose other things. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, not basing it based on money. Like, the more discussion we had is like that again, the career growth in terms. I see that it's also point to money again. Okay, yeah. So, like, any first steps that you would suggest? Like, we started talking. Like, actually, we've been talking that for quite a bit. Like, any first actionable step that you would suggest, like, in making this decision?
I guess I would start by just laying out a variety of options that are available to you and then kind of thinking about those. So it's more than I can do here with you in a public format. But if I were coaching you privately, I would say, well, what are the different lifestyles that you've considered? What are the different things that you've considered? And the same thing for your wife. What are the different things that she's considered? What are the things that she's, would be open to? And so, based upon that, I would have some sense of what your family values and some sense of what your options are. And then you would go with those options and then adjust and adapt. That's where I would begin.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. And then the final thing, you asked a question, you said, okay, how do I do this, right? Where is this all heading? What's the meaning of it all? That's a big question, and I've already touched on a lot of it, which is basically that you're locked into this. You're locked into a worker. You are a working slave, right? You are not technically a slave, but yet your life is not much different than if you were a slave. The thing about slavery with human chattel slavery, which is immoral, but if we look at it, so let's start with that. I'm not recommending slavery. I'm just saying, if we look at it, what happened in slavery was that a slave owner owned a piece of property, the human slave, that produced work for him. But he was responsible to provide for that worker all the things that the worker needed. So the slave owner had to provide for the slave his home, his accommodations, his food, and the slave owner had that responsibility. And many slave owners took that quite seriously and provided reasonable and appropriate accommodations for their slaves. Well, then, as slavery has been abolished in many places in the world, what happened is that now the worker has to work, but the worker has to make all those decisions for himself. He has to provide his own housing. He has to provide his own food. And basically, if you don't have that stuff working really well with a really core plan, then you wind up kind of living at the margin, and you wind up kind of stuck, and you're technically free, but yet you're not actually free because there's not major change. And so what are the things that you can do? Well, you can adjust your expenses is usually the most straightforward thing, is that we're just not going to spend money and we're going to learn how to not spend money. There are neighbors of yours who are in the exact same position that you're in, who spend 30% of what you spend, right? Recognize that in the United States of America, the median wage for a single wage earner is, I think, $54,000 right now. So 50% of people in the United States of America earn less than $54,000 and 50% earn more. So you earn double yourself. You earn double the median wage. The median household income in the United States right now, I think, is $80,000, somewhere in that range. So if my $80,000-ish number with usually a dual income household, if $80,000 is correct, you earn 3 times the median wage in your household. So you should be feeling rich. If you're not feeling rich, it's almost assuredly due to your expenses being out of control. So you have neighbors that are living with a median household income of $80,000, and you have a median household of $240,000. You could reduce your expenses, and you could live on total expenses of $5,000 to $7,000 a month, guaranteed, because that's what people do. That's what the numbers say. But you're spending more than that because you can. So that's usually where your fastest pathway is, where over the course of the next 3 to 6 months, you could make small and dramatic changes to reduce your expenses. Then when you have, and I don't know how much your expenses are because I'm not digging into it at the moment. It could be that this is bad advice because you're just spending little money. But if you were, you would have freedom. So then the point is that if you're spending 50% of your wages, then now all of a sudden you generally feel much more confident when they want you to work late. You're like, nope, I'm not going to work late. You want to work overtime? Nope, not going to work overtime. And you start to take control of yourself, and you start to emerge from slavery into independence and autonomy. That I have a job, and I'm happy to do my job, and I'm willing to do a job, but I'm not gonna destroy my life for my job, especially in these years when my children are so key. And then when your expenses are lower, it also opens up other solutions for you where you say, you know what? We could make it as a single income family. And you know what, honey, let's do it. Let's have 3 more children and let's have a single income family for the next 8 years. Or, you know what, let's start a family business. If we work together, we could have a family business, and now you have the money from your savings and you have the ability to start kind of down a different path. And what usually causes people to not be frustrated is that they have a goal and a vision. So whenever I'm working with a man who's expressed some of the emotions that you've expressed to me, and you say, you know, I'm worn out. I don't know what to do. I don't know where this is heading. Then what I try to do is I try to say, well, where do you want to go? And can we get on a pathway there? Because if you have a goal for where you're going as a man, and you have a plan that is reasonable so that you're making progress towards your goal, that will fill you with confidence in a way that nothing else does. And my favorite quote on this, I think may have been W. Clement Stone. I need to look it up. But basically, he said, happiness is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. Right? Happiness is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. So when you have a vision of where you're going, you can work like a dog, sun up to sundown, be tired, but you're satisfied that I'm making progress. But if you don't feel like you're making progress towards your goals, then it's difficult to feel happy because you just feel like you're spinning your wheels, and nobody likes to be stuck doing something that's worthless. So that's kind of gently how I would coach you. The final comment I would make on your second one, and then we'll move on. But the second question you said is, or the other comment is, if your family life is chaotic, you need to upgrade your skills. So you have to look at your family life and you have to say, I'm not willing to accept this. And by the way, there's no like perfect thing. 6 months ago, I looked around and I was like, my family life is much more chaotic than it should be. So I have to fix it. And I have been fixing it for the last 6 months. And so you have to recognize that as the father of the household, it's 100% your responsibility. And so you have to look at your household and you have to pull it apart and talk with some friends and talk with people you respect and talk about specific things, and you have to start fixing things one by one. So it may start with bedtime. Usually, I would say the most important thing for you to be a maniac about is the time that your children are in bed. So you've got to make sure with young children, they need to be in bed at 7 o'clock, 7:30, something like that, because you and your wife need time in the evening together. And so if you have a disorganized bedtime, then you don't have an hour with her. And then what happens is that when you don't have time with your wife, she starts to fall apart and she's frazzled because she spells love as Time. And so she starts to fall apart and she's all frazzled. And then you're stressed and then you're angry at each other and you're yelling at each other and there's no sense of love and camaraderie and everything's miserable. And yet children's bedtime is the key thing, the key thing that you can do. So then you back up from that. You say, okay, well, children's bedtime, what's the problem there? And I'm projecting, but usually it would be the problem that she gets out of work at 5:30. I get out of work at 5:30. How on earth can we get home at 6:30 and have children in bed at 7 o'clock? Joshua, that's ridiculous. It's easy for you to say, but we can't do that. So you have to say, okay, well, the children are going to be in bed at 7:30 no matter what. So that means we need to eat at 6 or 6:30. And if we get out of work at 5:30, I got to fix this. So you may have to fix it as in you change your work schedule and you get out earlier, you work through lunch and you leave at 5 or something. You may change it with once a month cooking. So you say, we've got to fix our cooking situation. So we're going to go on the internet, we're going to search once a month cooking, and we're going to, cook once a month, and we're going to have food there. Or we're going to become masters of the crock pot, that every single morning before I leave for work, the food is going in the crock pot so that when I get home at 5:30, it's ready. And so this is just an example that you have to start fixing these issues in your family, and you have to take control, and you have to look at it. And as you start to bring order to chaos, and you start to see little changes over time, then it builds your confidence. And as your confidence grows, you take more more and more bigger and bigger steps, and you fix more and more things, and you realize all of a sudden, you know what? Actually, we're getting to bed on time. And you know what? My wife and I were fighting a little bit less because we have time together. And you know what? We fixed this and we fixed that. And then you can see that you're making progress. But that's your responsibility as a father, is to identify what are those cornerstone things that I can fix, and how am I going to fix them, and then start testing things. And it doesn't always work the first time. Sometimes you try 5 things and they all fail. I've tried so many different things in so many areas and they fail. But it's the determination that you have to say, if it's to be, it's up to me. I am 100% responsible. I will bring order to this chaos, and I will fix these situations, because I will not wake up at 45 years old or 40 years old and look back and feel like that was a wasted decade. I'm not willing to settle for that. And then what happens is, as you do that, your wife's confidence in you grows. And again, your confidence in yourself grows, and you say, yeah, you know what? We could handle another child. And you build onto that. And then you build and you build and you build, and it goes. But it all starts with you. So you got this, man. You were built for this.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah, good. Really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much.
Me too. All right. Thank you for those of you who've been patiently waiting. We go to Michael in North Carolina. Michael, welcome to the show. How can I serve you today?
Hello. Thank you. Long-time listener, first-time caller. So
welcome.
Actually, I did do hire you for a coaching session a while back, and it was a big help. So advocate for that for any of your listeners.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Why I'm calling today is, so I've had a pretty good career in sales, and it's been a good time, and been making decent money. But actually, kind of to go off of what you just touched on there, was like feeling like you're making progress. And so right now I'm thinking to myself, like, do I want to build my life and my legacy to be around this sales career? And one of the things that you had mentioned, or I'm actually going to your camp as well, so I'll be there at camp here coming up. So
awesome.
I'm excited for that. But you're talking about community and legacy, and that's got me thinking, like, what am I going to leave for my family as part of a legacy? And part of it, I know I can build it outside of a family business or something like that. But part of me is also like, I would love to be working towards something that is going to have that would last beyond me. So I've been inspired by some of the conversation there. And I think one of the things is, like, let's say a decade ago, I tried to do a blog, to see if I could generate some income online. I actually did financial coaching for a period of time, which is how I ran into your content. And so I've done a couple things, but nothing that's gotten like significant traction. So maybe you could point me in some directions of some content, or you could make some comments on, how someone could get started developing that plan, taking steps towards it, with the kind of goals in mind that I had just mentioned to you.
I've thought a lot about this question, and you and I have some similarities in our approach, right? I got interested in sales, and one of the challenges with sales is it can be a very high-paying job, but it's often not much more than a high-paying job. It's a skill set that is yours, and you can use it to make money, but it doesn't build something over time. And in most sales careers, it's hard to find something where you're actually building equity. Usually it just is that you have to continue on, day after day, and the more you sell, the more you make. So I think it's perfectly appropriate for you to be open to some kind of career change, and in fact, even advisable. The great thing about sales is that once you've mastered sales, you can take it and you can employ it in other areas. I don't think that all of us are going to be able to achieve some kind of multi-generational business. If you study some of the 800-year-old businesses in Japan, or the 350-year-old businesses in the United States, things like that, you will see that sometimes they've been able to, clearly some people have been able to create a multi-generational business. And that seems super attractive to me and to you. But I'm not sure that should be the first kind of starting point, meaning that I think, I've thought about this, because one of the problems with radical personal finance, one of the things I don't like about this business is that it is me. The business is me. And so could it be changed to not be me? Well, I think Dave Ramsey has demonstrated that the business can be changed to not be him. He's worked really hard at that over the last decade. It's still him and his business, but he's worked really hard to bring other people in, to bring in place a succession plan. As far as I can tell, with no inside knowledge, he's been quite successful at it. So you can probably take a business that's based around a person and move it on. But it might be easier if you had a chain of supermarkets. And so what I'm trying to say is that but if I think about running a chain of supermarkets, I think, okay, well, that's interesting. But is that interesting enough to get me to go and do it because this can be a multi-generational business? Not so much. Like I'm not super drawn to the supermarket business, but respect to those who are. So I look at it and I say, there are probably a lot of ways through it. And what you should do is start with yourself and start with the kind of business that you want to be in. And then my guess is that even that itself will have some attractive power. So it's not one of my children says, well, Daddy, I'm going to be a podcaster when I grow up. And I say, great, absolutely. That's just the natural child to father relationship, that when you're a child, you want to be like your father. And so I don't know if podcasting will exist in some form, but what I do know is the skills of podcasting or the skills of sale, the skills of business will exist. And I don't think that, so I don't know how to tell you what, 300-year business to pursue. We can go and do some research on that and find some of those. But I do think regardless of the business you pursue, I think you can accomplish some of your vision with dynasty and legacy goals in a variety of businesses, as long as they have certain characteristics, right? So one of the characteristics that I value, even in line, contrasting with my previous caller, is that I value the fact that I'm relatively free to be with my children. The biggest cost that I see for someone who's in a situation like the previous caller is that, as far as I'm concerned, you basically miss your children's life. And the average student spends about 18,000 hours in school if you're in kind of a standard industrial school model. And one of the reasons I homeschool is I'd like to get a good portion of those 18,000 hours back with my children. When you realize how short life is, then I'd like to have that. And so just simply choosing to go from a sales business where you can't be involved with your children to something else where you can have children involved with you could be very productive for you. And it may not become multi-generational, but it can move you in the direction that you're trying to go, and it may influence and impact your children. I have some more thoughts on it, but I will say simply that I'm more in line with the vision, and I'm still trying to figure out how to accomplish the vision rather than me having, a list of, hey, here are the great ideas that you can have. But what I am confident in is that when a man has a vision, over time, you will see the progressive working out of that vision in some way, that it basically guides your decisions systematically. And there's a good amount of time for you to work these things out. My eldest is 11. I haven't solved it. Of course, I have some ways where my children can work with me, but because of the technical nature of it, like radical personal finance is not the only thing I do, but it's not very friendly to children. But I still have this vision. I want to help them to have the skills. And so I have other things that I'm working on that are going to incorporate them. But then that'll be a different phase than perhaps when I have a 30-year-old, right? If I have a 30-year-old son, then we may go in a completely different direction. And if you're building financial capital along the way, which you should be, and you have good relational capital, then I think that along the way, whenever that opportunity opens up for you, you'll see how to do it. And again, it may not be something that you do today. You may spend another decade in sales, but you're building financial capital and you're building good relational capital with your children. But then you come along and you've got a 35-year-old child and you've got a couple $1,000,000 set aside. Now you come in and you partner with a 35-year-old and you're 60, but you've got a vision to do this. And now you guys together will be able to go into that business together, and you'll have a good 20 or 30 year career side by side with him. But it didn't start when he was 6. It started when he was 35. So that's what I would like to say, just that I don't know how to do it. I'm working on it. I'm making progress. I have ideas, but I do know that if you are looking for it, and as we're going to be talking about in detail at camp, if you're looking for it, then you'll be the right things will emerge along the way. And what you can do now, just like you're asking me the question, keep asking other people the question, ask other family businesses the question, and stockpile money for investment capital and build relational capital so that your family has the kind of family culture that will endure. That's what I would focus on.
I appreciate the comments there. Yeah, and I've been trying to inspired by you and what you're doing to make sure that I do. I'm trying to be really intentional with my family, so that's why I'm bringing my boys to camp this year.
Awesome.
Kind of surrounded by people that are focused like that. So I appreciate the comments. I'm sure I know there will be a diverse group of people there, and I look forward to talking to some of the entrepreneurs and things, learn from them as well, which is one of the reasons why I chose to pull the trigger this year and go. So thanks for the comments. Appreciate your time.
I'm so glad that you did. And yes, we're going to have a great time together. So I will look forward to seeing you in a few weeks. Brendan in Texas, welcome to the show. How can I serve you today?
Hi, Joshua. Thanks so much for taking my call.
My pleasure.
My wife and I recently welcomed the birth of our first son about 3 months ago.
Congrats, man.
And thank you so much. And so it's been really great welcoming in and enjoying this time with our son. My wife is going to be going back to work within the next few months. She took off, obviously, her 3 months paid from work, then a couple extra unpaid. But we decided, she works from home, but we decided to get a full-time nanny in lieu, instead of sending him to daycare.
Great.
Kind of as a good middle of the road path. Since she isn't too sure if she wants to leave the workforce just yet, or stay working. So anyway, that's kind of what we decided to do. But anyway, tax question in regards to if our nanny would qualify. I'm trying to find a way around or avoiding calling her a household employee pursuant to IRS publication 926. And it seems to say, based on their definition, if you don't control how they do the work, then they aren't your employee. But in the examples they list, it kind of forces your hand into saying, yes, they are your employee, and yes, you have to pay FICA taxes, which is what I'm trying to avoid. So are you familiar with this? And if so, do you have any guidance?
I have not read that publication in years. So you are much more current on that. I'd have to go and dig into it and look at it. My general impression, however, is that you need to just pay your household employee and pay the taxes. If you do that, at least you could deduct some of your expenses according to the Child and Dependent Care Tax Credit. But generally speaking, I think that if you have a household employee, be it a nanny, be it a cook, be it a housekeeper, you need to file taxes for that person as a household employee. And I do not recall any kind of legal loophole to that. I don't recall any fun thing other than somebody who runs a business and contract services, in which case, sitters in a second or whatever, where you're just paying a child care agency rather than paying a person. So I don't recall ever having heard something like that. So I think suck it up and pay the taxes and file as a household employee is what I would think you would do.
Okay. Do you have time for our second question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we're getting him baptized soon, and as part of his baptism gift from my parents wanted to start a investment account for him. And so I had asked them about, them setting up an UTMA or UGMA. But their intention, in talking with my mom briefly, was that they intended to use the money for him, which I'm not in total agreement with, but for down payments on a house upon them turning the age of 25. And I believe that the UGMA age of majority is somewhere between the ages of 18 and 21, depending upon the state. Is there a different vehicle that you know of that would limit the age or extend the age until 25 that my parents could use instead?
They could simply create a trust with a lawyer, a custom trust, for the benefit of the child and put the money there. The reason is, and so that would be the most obvious way that they could solve it. How much money are they interested in investing or considering investing?
They haven't shared with me the amounts, but it sounds like they intend to, periodically put money into the account on birthdays and special occasions is what it sounds like.
Yeah. So I would say there are a few ways to do it. Number one is they can just keep the account themselves. And they can set the money aside. They can control the money. They can own the money. They can keep the account themselves and just earmark it for this is for the child, right? That's how it's always been. People have done it throughout time. So you don't necessarily need a separate account. They can keep it for themselves. Obviously, that has advantages and disadvantages. The advantage of that is they can do anything they want with the money. They can own anything. They have full control over it. They can just fund it. There's no limit on how much money can go into it. And then when your child turns 25, they can write them a check for whatever it is, $200,000, and buy the house. And here you go. Here's a gift of $200,000. That's a perfectly reasonable and legal and rational way to do it. The downsides of that approach are, number one, it's an asset of the parents. So, for example, if the parents were sued or went bankrupt or something like that, it's still an asset that the parents own. Of course, also, that doesn't give any unique tax benefits. So tax benefits, depending on the wealth of your family, would include income taxes. So any income taxes that are earned on the investments are going to need to be paid by the parents. And then things like estate taxes. The money is owned by the parents, and so it's within their taxable estate. So if they had, let's say your parents had $100 million and they were trying to give $5 million to their new grandson, then we wouldn't just they wouldn't just keep the money. But I'm pointing this out to say that we don't always need to have some special account. They could just open an investment account in their name, invest in whatever they want, put checks in there, and in their minds, with their commitments, they know this money, we're not going to spend it. This is money that is earmarked for our children. That, I think, is what most parents tend to do as well. It's like, okay, this is your account, but it's a co-signed account, things like that, and things are squared away. And they can put provisions in that. So it can be a transfer on death account, so that if they die, it goes right to the grandchild. It can be earmarked in their will. It can be a beneficiary account. Like, there are a variety of ways that you could do that without any kind of formal account. Now, let's just say that that's not a good option. They say, no, we really want this to be a fully segregated thing. Well, to have full control, they can always write up any kind of trust. So you can write up a custom trust, talk to a lawyer, and write up a custom trust and say, we're going to put this money into the trust. The trustee is going to invest the money in this certain way. And then at the age of 25, the money is going to become available for the child. So this is the best option if you're talking about significant sums of money, because you have full control, and we could set this up as a defective trust so that the parents pay the taxes on it. One of the downsides of a trust is that if it's a separate trust, then ordinarily, of course, you have the highest tax rate because the trust tax rates are quite high. That could be mitigated by simply focusing on capital gains assets that aren't going to incur annual taxation, or it can be set up as a defective grantor trust where the parents pay the taxes on it so that the money in it stays there. The point is that you can write a trust to say anything, and the trust is really in many ways kind of the ultimate vehicle, because this is a fully segregated asset. So imagine your child gets married at 22 years old, and the girl he marries turns out to be crazy, and now he's facing a divorce at 24 years old. Well, if there was an UTMA or an UGMA, then immediately the money, becomes his. Whereas if it's in a trust, even if she's a nutso and sues him left, right, and center, well, the money's in a trust. It's protected. So if you're doing things like divorce planning for your children, having a full, proper, separate trust is a good way to do that, because it protects your children from the financial risks of divorce, also creditor risk, things like that. Why wouldn't they do that in this situation? Well, probably because they would spend as much money, drawing up the trust as they would put in the trust. When people are doing something like you're describing, they're usually not thinking about millions of dollars. That's why UTMA and UGMA accounts exist. It's basically kind of a cheap trust that gives simplicity and yet gives a lot of the same features of a trust, but it doesn't require you to set up some kind of custom trust. You might be able to buy, I don't really go in for like buying documents on the internet and things like that, but I have to concede that, there's enough self-help stuff out there that you could probably do something pretty inexpensively and then maybe pay a lawyer for an hour of his time to review the trust. Most of them don't like that, I think for good reason. But if we're talking modest amounts of money here, that would be a way to do it. And then you could get to, so you have UTMA accounts and UGMA accounts, like you've said. Those have all the rules that you've stated. You cannot force them to keep the money until 25. That's the downside of those types of accounts. Other than that downside, they work really well. So I think what some parents try to do is they say, well, we're just not going to tell them about the money, which I think is not advisable because that runs legal risk. If you're the supervisor on the account and the child turns 21 and that's when he should receive the money, he needs to receive the money. You don't just, oh, here you are at 25 and look, here's this money you had at 21. If there's most of the times there's not going to be bad blood, but if there's bad blood and he sues you, I think he wins that lawsuit. So that is the downside of the UPMA or UGMA accounts. So then we move into educational accounts. I think the magic accounts are usually a 529 account. And a 529 account is magical because it has so many of the good benefits of a trust, as in the grandparents can put the money in, they can front load their contributions by splitting their gifts, so they can put quite a lot of money in up front. The money is separate, though, from the parents' assets. So in many states, I don't know if it's most or many states, but in many states, the 529 accounts are separate, right? They're for the benefit of the child. And so they're outside of the grandparents' taxable estate for tax planning purposes. The taxes are deferred for income tax purposes. And yet the grandparents still have full control. And so they don't have to disperse the money at any point in time. They can change the beneficiary. They can adjust it all along the way. They have full control. So 529 accounts are really magical for this. And especially now that we have the pipeline to be able to get money out of a 529 account into a Roth IRA, then that is also a good solution as well. But that doesn't fulfill the goal of giving him a big down payment at 25, because that would not come out for a college institution, and thus we would lose some of the benefits there of the 529 account. Could still be worth doing, but we would lose some of the benefits. So what I would say is, if you think through those options, it should be apparent that one of them is kind of the goal or another. So I would say just probably for them, have them just have a separate account. They probably don't have any risk of getting sued. They probably don't have any estate tax issues. Just have them have a separate account, and they can just give him the money down the road. But yet they keep it in their own account for him and make investments into their own account for him. If we start to get into a situation where you're worried about using the annual gifts, like if they're very wealthy and we need to worry about their lifetime gifting amounts or things like that, then go ahead and at that point just have them write up a simple trust and fund the trust. That's what I would do.
Thanks, Joshua. Didn't consider that, so thank you.
Yep, my pleasure. And let's see, with that, we wrap up today's Q&A call. Hope you all enjoyed it. I'm glad we had some more callers today. Over the last few weeks, I've done some Q&A calls, but sometimes I've only had one caller call in. And so I've got some of those calls recorded and I haven't released them all, but just because they were just super short. But I have them. And what I would say is, if you'd like to talk to me and join me on one of these Friday Q&A shows, I'd encourage you to do that. The last few weeks, again, there's been lots of time. I'd be happy to engage with you. If you'd like to join me for one of these Q&A shows, go to patreon.com/radicalpersonalfinance, patreon.com/radicalpersonalfinance. Sign up to support the show on Patreon, and you will gain access to one of these Friday Q&A shows. Thank you very much.